Good morning. Today we are going to start with the topic transfer of property. In sale of goods, three things are important. One is transfer of property in the goods. The second is transfer of possession of the goods, that is delivery of the goods. And the third is passing of the risk. These three things, why they are important? Because these three things are going to answer what is the effect of transfer of ownership. Because the ownership changes, the effect changes. If the ownership is not yet changed, it is with the seller itself, then the effect will be different. Okay, but one thing is there, what is transfer of property in the goods? Transfer of property in the goods means ownership in the goods. Okay, so when the seller sells, SALE, the contract has taken place, the vested rights are being created with the buyer has become the owner. So once the ownership passes, risk also passes. Okay, so when we want to see whether the buyer is at loss or not, means when the goods are damaged or the goods are destroyed, who is at loss? The owner is at loss. So if the seller is yet the owner, the seller is at loss. If the buyer has become the owner, then the buyer is at loss. So we have to take decisions, or we have to decide who is at loss or who is liable at that time, or who is having that right at that time. This question should be answered whether ownership has passed or not. Okay, now if the case is to be filed against the third party, why against third party? Because maybe the third party has done some damage or destroyed the good. Who can file a case? The owner. Means the seller cannot file a case against the third party if the ownership is passed with the buyer. It is the buyer alone who can file the case. Okay, if the goods are damaged and the buyer has become the owner, the loss is of the buyer, not the seller. Okay, now when we have to decide about insolvency also, means insolvency of seller is there, insolvency of buyer is there, at that time the effects are different. Means if ownership is of the seller and the seller has become insolvent, yet the ownership is of the seller only, so his official receiver will take possession of those goods and they will sell it. And what about the buyer? The buyer has paid some amount. He will not get the whole amount. He will get the proportionate rate which the insolvency court will decide. Okay, we have previously seen this topic about insolvency in sale and sell. We have made difference between SALE and SELL. At that time we have seen insolvency of the seller, what happens, insolvency of the buyer, what happens, and that position, or you can say that question, who is at loss and what happens, that we have answered only with one statement and one question, who is the owner. Okay, so ownership, whether passed or not, that's very important. And suit for price also, the seller can sue for price only when the buyer has become the owner. When the property in the goods has passed with the buyer, then only the seller can file a case for suit for price. But if yet the seller is the owner and the buyer is not paying the money, the buyer is not paying the price, then the seller only can sue for compensation, but he can't file a suit for price because he is the owner. So for deciding all these questions, we have to first know when the ownership has passed. Okay, this is called as passing of property. So three things are important: ownership when it passes, risk when passes, and delivery. Two things can be answered together because risk follows the ownership. Whoever is the owner, he is at risk. If the seller is the owner, the risk is his. If the buyer is the owner, the risk is his. Okay, so now the question only remains about when the ownership passes. Okay, now when the buyer has gone to the seller and he has ascertained the goods, he has ascertained existing goods are there. Existing goods means which the seller is having the possession of the goods and he is having the right to sell also, title to sell also. At that time the buyer comes to the shop and tells the seller, I am going to purchase these goods, means he has ascertained the ownership has passed. Okay, other things are formalities, that is payment and all, that are formalities, but the goods are ascertained. So when the goods existing goods become specific and ascertained, the ownership passes. And moreover, what the intention of the parties is also very much essential. What the buyer says, what the seller says, that's important. Because if the buyer says also, like, I want these goods, I am going to purchase these goods, if it is just an invitation to offer, whatever the goods are being shown, if that is just an invitation to offer, you have made an offer, means the buyer has made an offer, the seller may accept or not. So intention of the parties is very much necessary. So when the intention is clear of taking possession and taking ownership, then the ownership passes. Okay, see, where there is a contract for the sale of specific or ascertained goods, the property in them passes to the buyer at the time when the parties intend it to pass. Okay, for the purpose of ascertaining the intention of the parties, regard must be given to the terms of the contract, the conduct of the parties, and the circumstances of the case. Means if you see the terms of contract, if you see the conduct of the parties, if you see the circumstances of the matter, you will come to know whether they intend to pass the ownership or not, whether the seller is willing to give it or not, whether the buyer is willing to take it or not. Okay, so when the goods become ascertained, at that time ownership passes. In these circumstances, intention is very much essential. Okay, so till the goods are unascertained, ownership is not yet passed. Now when the goods are future goods or contingent goods, the goods must come into existence, or the goods are not yet prepared, means yet they are not existing. At that time what will happen? The goods must be in a deliverable state. Means what the buyer has done, buyer has told to the seller that these are the specifics, these type of goods I want. Better prepare it within 1 month, make it within manufacture it within 1 month. So when he manufactures the goods, when the goods become deliverable, at that time the ownership passes. Okay, now sometimes the goods are being sent on approval or sale or return, means the seller is sending the goods to the buyer, and what is selling, if you want to purchase, if you approve, keep it. If you don't want to purchase, return it. That is called as sale or return, or goods sent on approval. Now when the goods are sent on approval basis, at that time what the buyer has to do, either the buyer has to keep it, means the ownership has passed, either the buyer has to inform it to the seller that I want to purchase, ownership has passed, or either he has to inform the rejection that I don't want to purchase, I return it. When he returns, when he informs the rejection, at that time the ownership has not passed. Okay, so when the buyer signifies his approval or acceptance to the seller, ownership passes. Or when he does any other thing which tells about adopting the transaction, accepting the transaction, means what he has done, he has kept the goods, he has consumed the goods, it means he has done something which shows his acceptance, so the ownership passes. Okay, now these are the requirements which we have to see whether ownership has passed or not. When the goods become deliverable, the seller is going to tell to the buyer that the goods are in a deliverable state, better come and take it. Or sometimes it happens that the buyer himself will ask the seller that whether the goods are in a deliverable state or not. Means you had told me that you will be giving on 1st of Jan. Now it's coming near, only 2 days are left. I am here on 30th December. On 1st Jan you are going to give me the goods, whether they are in a deliverable state. He can also apply, and both are going to talk with each other, negotiate with each other, and he will tell that yes, the goods are in a deliverable state. At that time the ownership is going to pass. Okay, this is called as, these are the provision you can say in law which tell when the ownership passes, and that's very important because of that we have to decide when and who will be liable, whether buyer is liable, whether seller is liable, whose risk is there. All those questions can be answered only when we know whether ownership has passed or not. Okay, today we have completed the topic transfer of property in the goods and transfer of risk. Bye bye. See you in the next video.